Hello, I'm Bill Wake. We're working on the SortTables data analysis tool that I developed about 2 or 3 years ago, and we're focused this week on getting rid of DatabaseViewModel, which is the old model and is a bit of a problem. So the before state is we had DatabaseViewModel. It kept track of the active tables and the joins, and then active tables knew about the table view model, and joins knew about the table columns. And it also table column also knows about active tables. So there's a bit of a loop there. And there was a lot of notification. So these are all classes. They're mutable objects. And we have a custom notification system that kind of builds on the built-in one, but also kind of stands aside from it. And I've shown the dotted lines to show which things are notifying each other to keep the pieces of the model in sync as it changes. Now, this whole thing was about 500 lines. After we finish this week, we have different objects in somewhat the same arrangement. Database selection knows about the table selections, and it knows about the joins. And table selection needs to know the table metadata, basically the name of the table and the columns. And the join needs to know the scoped column, which is like when you say person.id, a class, a table name, and then a column. Okay, I want to say class and field, but in SQL it's tables and columns. Okay, and over here, these are all structs. They're immutable objects, and we're using strictly the framework-based notification, which I understand a lot better than I did a couple of years ago. It's clearly the far simpler approach. Now, they've changed notification yet again in SwiftUI, and I haven't tried using the newest approach, but this one is quite an improvement. We're down to about 200 lines, and I think there's probably another 20 to 50 lines that are going to go away soon, I hope. All right, so let's see this in action. I'll kind of relate what classes know what, and then we'll go take a look at the old style and the new style. So the first thing we have is this database view represents the whole window. So you can see here's the picker for the database, and all the rest of it is in here, sections for joins and so on. All right. This thing holds, or its model is basically a database selection. And database selection is focused on what tables are there. So these are tables from the database with their columns inside. And when you select them, you can turn them off so they're not going to be in the final result. So here I've turned them all off. If I have them on, notice there's a warning: unjoined tables result in a very large data set. Class times, it's a cross product really, if you know SQL. A class, person, and registration all multiply. They don't just work together. We can add joins though. So if I join registration's class to class's ID, we get a different complaint: class registration times person. And if I turn off person, we're only looking at class and registration. They're joined together. There's no issue. So we put in some rule checking this week to make sure those joins work okay. All right. And I'm not sure, we may have even added the joins as well. I may have done that last week. I'm not quite sure. All right. And then within okay, so database selection has table selection. This section, it keeps track of the table metadata, name and columns, but it also keeps track of which columns are visible and whether the table itself is toggled. So I can turn off individual fields, or I can turn off whole tables. And notice I can still use it in a join even if it's turned off. This is what values will be shown in the end. Okay. So basically it's really just managing the toggle state of the table and the toggle state of the individual columns. Then we have the joins. Joins are table.column equals table.column. So scoped column represents that table.column. And really this is just keeping track of what two scoped columns are going to be equated. We just do an inner join with the equals relationship, and it knows which columns are tables are used, so it can answer questions about that. And then finally, scoped column is trivial. well, pretty simple anyway. It's really just a table dot column, and we write it with kind of a fancy dot, but it's really just table dot column, and it can be compared and it's hashable, so we can keep track of them. All right, so that's the new system. A couple hundred lines, far, far, far easier than the old system. The old system, the bad thing was we had to do this notification. If I just look at what it's holding information wise, it's very similar. I mean, it kind of has to be. The join needs to know the two tables, the table and columns. Okay. The funny part about this, though, and I really struggled with this, back when I first started it a couple of years ago, anyway, 2 or 3 years ago. We have to do some additional notification. So, and this is because we have model objects that hold model objects that hold model objects. And if anything changes at the very low level, we need to make sure that the upper level objects know about it. And so the mechanism we can use for that is called cancellables. And it's sort of provided with observable object that you can create publishers that say, let this, no, basically it tells people, hey, notify your syncs, whoever's listening, tell them the object is going to change when I store things, when I publish things, when I change a field, and store that in this cancellables list, which is, I don't know, it's just kind of a mechanism to keep track of which notifications haven't gone through yet, I think. But we have to do this at several levels, and it just adds a lot of weight to the class. Okay, like all these lines, this line is probably some other initialization or usage somewhere. Maybe we're off the hook. But at any rate, it adds a bunch of weight, and then understanding how it notifies and all that is really painful. So the old model had to go. It's like I just couldn't bear dealing with that all the time. The new model, this stuff all is automatic with structs. They're immutable, but the system does some management, and if you can change it, it creates a new object for it. Just like when you assign a number to a variable, it can be a new different entity. You can still assign it, so they're immutable in that sense, but they're both mutable and immutable, I guess is the way to say it. The system detects when you change it and says, hey, I ought to let other people know, and it lets anybody who points to it or contains it know that that's been done. There's another mechanism called binding. Let's see if I can. Yeah, so binding says, pass a two-way link to the value in this thing, and you can do that with the parts of a struct and so on all the way down. So you don't have to manually do the notifications going up and around. So that all worked much, much better. Let's see. So things we did this week, we made the database selection able to write the memento, which is a storage mechanism. One of the things we do is let you save a configuration. So there's a mechanism to store it, database config memento, and the new database selection now knows how to write this memento. It's got database name, table selections, and joins, all the stuff that we need in there. And we also added, there's two memento going the other way. And then we added the ability to write the working schema, which is once you actually open the database, that's the fields and values that operate within the table structure, the sort table structure. So sort tables automatically sorts from the first column to the last column, and I'll demo the whole thing another time. All right. Let's see. Tuesday we were working on the joins, so we did those critiques that complained about the unjoined tables, and that worked out very nicely. There's a little separate class that does that, and a little clustering algorithm we were able to pull out of that basically creates each table as its own individual cluster, and then when there's a join, it merges clusters And at the end, it can tell you what are all the clusters. And so that directly feeds that warning message up top. Let's see, Wednesday we finished that mechanism. And then we spent the rest of the day removing the old database view model, which isn't here. I guess it's still on here. I can pull that up. Basically, all the places that did I/O that used the old model, we removed it and just went with the database selection information instead. And then finally today, we did all the deleting. Okay, that was a nice point. We got to delete database view model. Well, we basically got to delete all these. Active tables model is held, database view model, join view model, table view model, and somewhere in there's the table column view model. And then this one just had one error we were using, and we were able to move it to another class. All right, but the end result of this is so much cleaner, and so much less notification and worrying about that. You just represent the state, and it's the system's job to kind of make it all consistent and update things. So that worked out really nicely. Where we're going from here, well, we have this notion of the memento going to and from the memento, which is the stored version of this thing. It gets written as JSON, so it knows a format, database name, table names, and so on. It's codable, but I think when I look at the information in database selection and table selection and join, they're all basically containing they're containing either simple information like strings, or they're a struct that consists of information like that. So database selection has a string for this. It has table selection, which has a reference to table metadata, which is all strings, a Boolean, a set of strings. All these things are things that can be codable. And so my hope is next week we can work on marking all these as codable. And I believe we can get it so that the automatically generated translation to JSON is just going to happen once we get the classes marked properly. We took a go at it today and I messed up something, but I think there's a way to do that. And so once these are all marked codable, I expect that the memento and the to memento stuff just go away, and we can just say, write this database selection as JSON, and it'll just go off and do it. So I think we'll clean up a bunch of work in here, another 20 or 50 lines anyway, and in some of the others as well. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm really happy with how this has turned out, though. It made me feel like, I finally kind of understand the framework enough to do this properly, and it all mostly just worked. I didn't have a lot of problems with things not notifying, unless I completely forgot to hook them up. But it really did come together smoothly. So it was a very good week in terms of replacing something complicated with something much simpler. And then after we get this done, the memento stuff, there's a little bit of cleanup to do, but we're going to move on to other things. So one is I'd like to be able to put the same table in here again, and give it an alternate name. So you can do things like, notice this one, we have instructor foreign key, which is a person, and we have the student in a class, registered for a class, is another person. They're not necessarily the same people, so you'd like to be able to have two-person tables, and maybe you want to show the class, the teacher, and all the students. So we want to allow that. We've got a place where we open configurations that we've saved, but really we can just go in there and you don't have to type in the name. You could just select one that's there. I also want to allow renaming of fields. So if I wanted to call this class name or session or something instead of name, I don't want the ambiguity of a person.name and a class.name. I'd like to be able to do that. And then, I think there's some user interface refinements about, when do you have to save and things like that. But it should be pretty straightforward to do these things. I mean, after deleting all that complexity, I think it is really just, there's going to be an extra field for the columns. There's going to be an extra field for the names with their alternate name and so on. And making that work, I think, will be pretty straightforward. I'm hoping. Anyway, so I had a pretty good week this week. I'm happy with how it resulted, and I'm looking forward to following up on it next week. If you want to join me, I've got a link to it at xp123.com/Twitch. We'll get you to the Twitch page. And then my upcoming schedule, I'll be here next week, Monday through Wednesday. It's 2 to 4:30 p.m. EST or 7 to 9:30 p.m. UTC. The following week is Christmas week. I may pop in and do something if I have an odd afternoon free, but I will not work on SortTables until January. So January 1st, I probably won't be working then, but Tuesday through Thursday, I'll be back at that same time. And then January 8th, back to normal. It's Monday to Thursday, 2 to 4:30 or 7 to 9:30 if you like EST or UTC. And then finally, I'll mention the old episodes are at https://xp123.com/YouTube. You can find these weekly summaries, but you can also find the daily sessions if you want to keep up with those. I'm a bit ahead of things. Well, they're time delayed. Maybe I should say it that way. The stuff I'm doing for SortTables probably isn't coming out till January sometime. I'm trying to catch up some things, so it'll be a lot less delay, but it's a little back there, a month or so back there. All right, thanks for joining me. Hope I can see you online at some point, and take care. Bye-bye.